"Last warning," she said. They attacked anyway and faced a Navy SEAL combat master. It was almost midnight. The city was still busy outside, but inside that parking garage, it felt like a completely different world. The lights were flickering. The air smelled like old oil and concrete, and the only sound was the quiet click of her heels echoing off the walls as she walked toward her car. She had been at a charity dinner that night, a fundraiser for the family of a soldier who had passed away, a man she had trained years ago. She stayed until the very end, helped clean up, shook hands with everyone, and slipped out quietly. That was just her way. She never made a big deal of herself, never drew attention. To anyone watching, she looked like any other woman walking alone in a parking garage late at night. Tired, distracted, easy. That was the biggest mistake those three men would ever make. She was 44 years old, retired, spent 18 years in the Navy, most of it doing things she still couldn't fully talk about. She had trained soldiers in close combat. She had been through survival courses that broke men twice her size. She had learned, over nearly 2 decades, how to stay calm when everything around her was falling apart. And after she left the military, she opened a small self-defense school in the city, mostly teaching women and veterans. She didn't advertise much. She didn't need to. Word spread on its own, but nobody in that garage knew any of that. She noticed them before they thought she did. That was one of the first things the military teaches you. Not just to look, but to actually see. 3 men came out of the stairwell in a way that wasn't random. They weren't just walking to their cars. They were spreading out, slowly, the way a net spreads in water. One went left, one went right. The third, the tallest one, kept walking straight toward her. She had seen this shape before, not in a parking garage, but in places far worse than this. She had read it in training manuals, and she had seen it happen in real life. 3 people, moving in a loose triangle, cutting off the exits. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. She didn't panic. She didn't freeze. She just quietly set her small purse on the hood of her car, adjusted her footing, and waited. The tall one reached her first. He had the kind of confidence that comes from doing something many times before and never getting caught. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. He said, very casually, that nobody needed to get hurt tonight. He just wanted her bag and her keys. He said it like he was doing her a favor. She looked at him. Then she looked at the one on her left. Then the one on her right. She took a slow breath. "This is your last warning," she said. "Walk away right now. I am asking you once." The man on the left laughed. The young one on the right looked nervous, but he was trying to hide it. The tall one in front of her slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a folding knife. He clicked it open like he had done it 1,000 times. He probably had. He took a step forward. What happened next lasted about 11 seconds. The security camera in that garage recorded the whole thing, and when the detective watched the footage later that night, she said she had to rewind it 3 times because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The moment the tall man moved toward her with the knife, she moved too, but not backward, forward, and slightly to the side. She stepped out of the direct line, like a matador letting the bull pass, and then she caught his wrist in a grip he was absolutely not expecting. There was a controlled twist, a very specific kind of movement that looks almost gentle from a distance, and the knife left his hand like it had somewhere else to be. It slid across the concrete floor and disappeared under a parked car. Before he could even process what had just happened, she hit him with the heel of her palm, open hand, straight to the nose. It wasn't a Hollywood punch. It was fast, precise, and it worked exactly the way it was supposed to. He stumbled back, eyes watering, hands going to his face. That was 3 seconds. The second man came at her from the left. He was bigger, and he rushed in fast, which is exactly what untrained people do when they're scared and angry at the same time. She didn't try to stop him head-on. She dropped her weight, got low, and used his own speed against him. It's a move that sounds complicated when you explain it, but when you have done it 10,000 times in training, your body just does it. He went over her hip and hit the concrete hard. She kept hold of his arm as he fell, and pinned it behind his back. He cried out. She didn't let go, but she didn't increase the pressure either. Just enough to hold. No more. 7 seconds. The third man, the young nervous one, had not moved. He was standing exactly where he had been when she first noticed him, and now he was watching 2 of his partners on the ground, one holding his face, and one pressed to the concrete with his arm locked behind him, and the woman in an evening dress looking at him, like she was waiting for him to make a decision. She said 2 words. "Sit down." He sat down on the concrete. He put his hands up, and then, according to the detective who took his statement later, he started to cry. 11 seconds. That was all it took. She called 911 while she was still holding the second man's arm. She gave the address clearly, described all 3 of them calmly, mentioned the knife under the car, and asked the operator to send medical, because someone had a possible broken nose. The operator later told a supervisor that she had never heard a 911 caller sound that composed in her entire career. Police and paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. When the detective who caught the case walked into that garage, she was fully expecting to find a shaken victim. What she found instead was a woman in a floor-length dress, sitting on a concrete parking barrier, drinking water from a small bottle, and waiting patiently. The detective introduced herself and asked what happened. The woman walked her through it, step by step, without any dramatics, the way you might describe directions to a grocery store. The detective kept glancing over at the 3 men, then back at the woman, then at the camera in the corner. Later that night, sitting in her car in the parking lot of the station, the detective watched the footage one more time on her laptop. She had worked serious crimes for 12 years, she had seen a lot. But she still rewound that 11-second clip 4 times. The 3 men were taken in. What came out during the investigation was worse than anyone expected. Police linked them to 5 other robberies over the previous 8 months, all of them targeting people alone, at night, in parking garages and similar spots. In one of those cases, an older man in his late 60s had been badly hurt. He had spent 2 weeks in the hospital. All 3 were charged. With their previous records, the sentencing wasn't light. A few weeks later, a court document with the woman's name in it found its way to a local news blog. The blogger posted a short write-up. By the next morning, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. Everyone wanted to talk to her. News stations, podcasters, magazines, morning shows. She said no to all of them. She made one statement, posted quietly on the social media page of her self-defense school. It said, "This story is not about me. It is about the fact that every woman deserves to feel as prepared as I felt that night. That is what I teach. That is all." The calls kept coming. She kept saying no. What she did say yes to was adding free Saturday classes at her school, open to any woman who could not afford the regular fee. She didn't announce it publicly. She just put a small sign on her door and told a few people. Within 2 weeks, the Saturday class was full. The detective who handled the case ended up stopping by the school one afternoon, off the clock, out of curiosity. She watched through the window for a few minutes. The woman was teaching a group of about 15 students, all different ages, showing them a simple wrist escape. She was patient. She corrected technique without making anyone feel embarrassed. She laughed when one of the older women in the class jokingly called it too easy to be real. She told her, gently, that simple things work. Complicated things fail under pressure. The detective left without going inside. She didn't want to interrupt, but she told a colleague about it the next day and said something that stuck. She said, she could have done a lot more damage in that garage and nobody would have questioned it. She had every right, but she didn't. She did exactly what was needed and nothing extra. That's not just training, that's character. And maybe that is the part of this story that matters most. Not the 11 seconds, not the 3 men on the ground, but the choice she made before any of that happened. When she set her purse on the hood of her car and said, clearly and calmly, that this was their last warning, that they still had a chance to walk away. They didn't take it, but she gave it to them anyway. Because that's what separates someone who has truly been trained from someone who just knows how to fight. She wasn't looking for a confrontation. She was hoping to avoid one. She had the ability to do serious damage, and the discipline not to, unless there was absolutely no other choice. There is a version of this story where she just hands over her bag and goes home, and those 3 men find another victim the next week. And maybe that version ends differently for someone who can't do what she can do. She thought about that. She has said so. In the rare moments she has talked about that night at all, she thought about whoever came next, and that thought, more than anything else, was what made her plant her feet and wait. Some people go through their whole lives hoping they are never in a situation like that. She spent 18 years making sure that if she ever was, hope would have nothing to do with the outcome, and on a flickering light midnight in a parking garage, that made all the difference.